welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live and I'm Cyril Stober. Political parties are mainly platforms for producing credible candidates to contest for positions of authority and exercise powers within the ambit of the law for a prescribed period of time, which is usually renewable. In Nigeria, for instance, there were more than 40 political parties before the deregistration exercise by INEC, making the APC and the PDP the two dominant parties that have enjoyed the electorate's patronage, with few others in control of some states. Now, on the return of democracy in 1999, the PDP took charge of the nation's political landscape for a period of 16 years, while the governing All Progressives Congress took over power through a keenly contested election in 2015 and 2019. Today, political parties are gathering momentum ahead of another cycle of elections in 2023. And parties are already struggling and trying to find their way through the maze of internal issues and another round of defections leading to litigations. So, how do these affect the future of a transparent and credible polls, voter participation, and possible entrenchment of discipline in the political sphere? But before we go into our discussion on party development, we'll also be dedicating a part of our time to the cheering news of the presidential assent to the Petroleum Industry Bill, now an act intended to impact on the national economy and the people of Nigeria. And now to discuss our first topic, the PIB and the presidential assent, let's get to see this report by Lydia Sampson.
June 2021 marks the end of an era in Nigeria's legislative arm of government. It is the termination of the Petroleum Industry Bill's 18-year parliamentary journey. The bill, conceived during the Olusegun Obasanjo administration in the year 2000, is part of efforts to reform the critical sector behind Nigeria's major foreign exchange earnings. Therefore, the bill, being the longest bill in the Nigerian parliament, evoked skepticism of ever being passed. Experts says the signing into law by the president pertains a vibrant oil and gas sector and more revenue for Nigeria through investment opportunities, which was eluding the country for lack of confidence in the investment terrain and a clear policy framework.
It will create additional infrastructure across petroleum value chain. Critical infrastructure will be developed utilizing the incremental revenue from increased petroleum activities. Greater confidence will be engendered.
The present Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, will be reformed and incorporated as the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited as the organization assumes full commercial status.
As the national oil company and also as an industry in this country, that is to produce the quick oil. Quick oil means that we have to monetize every resources that is available today so that we create the resources that will create the future for our country.
Truth to be told, the oil and gas sector remain pivotal to Nigerian economy.
The Petroleum Industry Act provides legal, governance, and regulatory and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities, and related matters. This, they say, is notching another high for the Buhari administration.
The intention of the law by making NNPC a Kama company is for it to be commercially driven.
They probably should be talking about NNPC being made a viable commercial entity that is allowed to operate in alignment with commercial interests and is not totally at the whims and caprices of those that own it.
The Act empowers the Minister of Petroleum Resources to incorporate the NNPC as a limited liability company 6 months after the commencement of the act. The bill's assent into law is expected to make the Nigerian oil sector more attractive and competitive, as well as strengthen accountability. The petroleum industry stakeholder says the 3% assented to for host communities by the president is a giant step towards social justice for the impoverished host communities. They reiterated that no law is ever perfect or can take care of every human desire all at once. For now, Host Communities Trust Fund and Management will spearhead development of the communities. Impact of the new regime on Nigeria's global competitiveness and capital investment in the sector, with focus on enhanced tax incentives as well as sustained frontier exploration.
I want to appreciate the cooperation and partnership between the two arms of government, the legislature and the executive arm. We have been able to really cement the relationship so that we are able to work together seamlessly.
The frontier exploration will be applied to all basins and undertaken simultaneously. Funding of the Nigeria Frontier Basin is through the provision of 30% from the NNPC Limited profit. In Abuja, Lydia Samson, NTA News.
All right, now joining me to discuss the issues is Ajuri Ngelale, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Thanks for being here.
Truly an honor to be with you.
Right. So many years. PIA, the Petroleum Industry Bill, so many years. Now you can say the Petroleum Industry Act. I suppose the government should ordinarily be commended on this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, but before I start, let me just say this is my first time sharing the stage with you. And I just want to say you're a major inspiration to people like me. As a broadcaster coming up, watching you night after night with my parents on NTA, I just want to thank you for your service to the nation. You know, it truly is a great occasion for the country that Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari has been able to really convert what has been a long conversation in the country into expressible manifest action. And with the Petroleum Industry Act now in place, Nigerians can now look forward to a truly globally excellent oil industry. And that's been attested to even by OPEC. When you look at the content of the Petroleum Industry Act, you know, a lot of times it's natural when you break a jinx to focus on the fact that you broke a jinx. But when you look at the content and how well envisaged the act is, that's really what we have to get excited about. First and foremost, as the report mentioned, we are now going to see a conversion of the NNPC from what has really been, for a very long time, over 40 years, a fairly slow to adapt government bureaucracy, really moving that into what will be a commercially viable, really fairly independent entity that is based on, maximizing the profit potential of the sector on the nation's economy. And moving forward, we've also been able to put in place really tangible timelines to ensure that this isn't just a conversation about a law that is not being implemented. You're now going to have timelines that say, look, within 6 months, the transition must be effectuated. You also have within this bill a set of very critical regulatory frameworks which ensure that we have a level of transparency in the oil and gas sector that we've never seen before in this country, really aligned with global best practice. When you look at specifically a whole host now of new tax reforms and regulations which basically stipulate that there will be verifiable detailed sanctions that will be given out to any stakeholder in the sector who is not abiding by the financial regulations, whether it's the underpayment of royalties, the tax defaulting, etc. So really, when you look at that and you also look at the fact that this act actually includes an annual independent audit of all the institutions involved in the oil and gas sector, whether it's the indigenous oil companies or the international oil companies, as well as even the supervisory bodies, the new Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, the new Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Agency, all of them are going to now be mandated to undergo a forensic independent audit every year.
Okay, but one of the first things that many Nigerians would want to know would be those critical issues, or how this act will impact on the Nigerian economy and by extension on the citizens.
A very important question. You know, really where we are right now is we have seen, it's important to remind our viewers that the Petroleum Industry Act now is actually a sequel to a very important step that President Muhammadu Buhari took in November 2019, when he signed into law the Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Act Amendment, which in effect stop the bleeding. We were losing billions of dollars to international oil companies in deep offshore revenues that were not being remitted to the Federation account because the Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Act had not been amended. Now, the reason why I mentioned that in the context of the Petroleum Industry Act is that we now have an act that consolidates on that. So we have international oil companies who have been essentially waiting to see what the outcome of the process of consultation and ultimately the assent of the Petroleum Industry Act would mean for ongoing projects or for future projects. So we currently have about 725,000 barrels per day in deep offshore projects currently in existence between about 4 different oil fields, including the Bonga deep offshore oil site, Erha, and others. We have about 8, Cyril, that are basically sitting on the table, about 825,000 additional barrels per day sitting on the table because they've been waiting for the PIA to come into effect. Now that that's done, we will have 8 oil fields opening up that have already been fully, feasibility studies, exploration, everything except for exploration done. Now you're going to have those come into effect. And how that's going to impact on the Nigerian economy is that that is going to unlock about $1.5 billion of annual revenue, which had not been possible to obtain before the assent of Mr. President to this Petroleum Industry Act. And that's just one benefit out of so many in terms of a direct economic impact on the nation's economy.
Well, at the start of it, we said, yes, it's kudos to the president for making this happen. But it has not all been unanimous. There have been a few voices that have challenged the signing of this bill because of certain issues, contentious issues. One of them, of course, the all too well publicized 3%.
Yes, of course.
To producing areas, and then the angst over whether or not some communities that have pipelines running through them should benefit. What do you say to that?
Thank you, Cyril. This is another area where I kind of take my SSA hat off now and put on my citizen hat, because I'm from Ekporo town of Eleme local government area, River State, where the local economy is based on fisheries and fish farming, which have not been in effect in business for decades now because of the adverse practices of international oil companies operating in the area, oil slicks all over our waters and the like. So I know where the shoe pinches the foot on the issues of host communities development. One of the major aspects of this legislation that I think most Nigerians, when they get all of the facts, will be very, very proud of is the Host Communities Development Trust, which has been established by the Petroleum Industry Act, in which 3% of the actual operating expenditure of all operators in the sector will be dedicated to this trust. And some people have, quibbled over the percentages. We need to understand what 3% actually is. We're not talking about 3% of maybe a bit of profit or 3% of just deep offshore. 3% of the total annual actual operating expenditure, which last year was $16 billion. You take the 3% of $16 billion and you know what we're talking about, and that's going directly to these communities. Now, that $16 billion is also reflective of the fact that you had a COVID-19 once-in-a-century pandemic. You had OPEC curbs on our production. So you know that the $16 billion expenditure from last year is going to be drastically elevated in the years ahead. But that 3% of the total is still going to continue, meaning that right now it might be $500 million approximately based on last year's estimates. But moving forward, you're going to be pushing toward $1 billion when we get our production up to what Mr. President is driving us toward, which is about 3 million barrels per day over the next few years. So when you look at that, and you know that that 3% equates to effectively what is more than what the NDDC currently sees in a year, you will know the kind of quantum of resources we're talking about. But that really is not, I think, the key. We have always, kind of thrown money at some of these challenges, but we know that governance has been the problem. And that's why Mr. President has put in place, first of all, the remedial efforts in the NDDC with the forensic audit, but also within this bill, with the HCDT, the Host Communities Development Trust, what you now have is a structure that says 75% of the entire trust will be spent solely on capital projects for these host communities. 20% will be sent to a reserve fund, which will essentially be used for the catering to the needs of these host communities at the time when the viability of oil has expired. And then a cap of 5% has been placed on administrative costs, because we know with government-owned enterprises over the years, the problem has been overhead running costs essentially eating up so much of the revenue. So now we put a cap of 5%, making sure that the money goes exactly where it's supposed to go. So I just want to say finally on that point that we should delineate between legitimate grievances of stakeholders from my region, the Niger Delta, and then those who are simply politically posturing ahead of the next election cycle. There are those who openly campaigned for a candidate who was not President Buhari in 2019 and lost out, and feel that this opportunity with the PIB assent and knowing that OPEC has celebrated it, the international community is commending it, that this is an opportunity to maybe knock the president because maybe it reminds them of what they failed to do. What we are saying is that we will deal with the legitimate grievances, but those who are using this as a tool to play politics, Nigerians will see them for what they're doing.
Just before we go, one quick thing. Is anything cast in stone? I mean, do you have any law that is perfect in itself? What I'm pushing at is there at some point in the future a chance to revisit one or two issues about the Act and even amend them?
Well, you know, President Muhammadu Buhari and the Vice President, His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, have proven to be two extremely open-minded and open-hearted leaders. I mean, these are leaders who are ready to engage with anybody, even with people who may have political or policy disagreements with them. They want to hear views from all sides. So this is a living, breathing document. This is a bit of legislation that we're proud of, but we know that there may be opportunities in the future to maybe revisit one piece or another. We have clearly what is a responsible leadership in the 9th National Assembly that has worked very swiftly and very intelligently on how we can get some of these critical policy instruments through the National Assembly. So in answering your question, I would say that clearly, with the leadership we have in place in the executive branch and the legislative branch and in the legislature, we are going to be very open about whatever, as we go into the implementation phase now, whatever needs to be adjusted. I'm sure that you'll have listening ears in the presidency.
Okay, right now, perhaps you need to put back that cap. The SSA cap, because I'm going to say this and ask you this. It took so long to get this bill through. Was it politics? Was it, economic sense? Or at what point? And when I say politics, cutting across the major parties and not even all the parties, was that the problem?
Well, this is a sensitive question. I'm happy you asked it, and I'm just going to answer you very earnestly. The fact of the matter is, we have for far too long, with very serious issues in this country, played politics with it. And we all saw the political imbroglio play out under the 8th National Assembly. I'm not going to be mentioning names here. Everybody knows who was there at the time. From budget padding scandals to cutting funding to critical projects that would have benefited the lives of our people, benefited the economy of the country, a lot of politics was played. I will say this. In the previous efforts to get the PIB done, you had the first effort in 2012 or so, where the executive branch essentially sat down and wrote the bill, sent it to the National Assembly. The National Assembly shut it down. Then you had the 2018 attempt under the 8th National Assembly, which was the leadership of the National Assembly at that time sitting down with themselves, effectively writing legislation that maybe they felt was in their interest. And then when the president saw it and scrutinized it, as he always does, thankfully for us, he saw that that bill essentially had stipulations which would have sold off ownership percentages of the NNPC to private individuals who none of us know, because those officials at the time thought maybe that was in their interest. Fortunately, the president saw that and shut it down. What the president now did, as the man of integrity as he is, He brought the leadership of the 9th National Assembly, understanding that this is a responsible leadership. He brought together the heads of the international oil companies, indigenous stakeholders in the sector, as well as heads of host communities and kingdoms in the region. And he essentially consulted with everybody and made sure that this was a document that was a win-win document that would not unduly favor one group over the other. And that is why you now have a document that was passed by the National Assembly and that will work in the interest of Nigerians and Nigeria and not in the interest of a few individuals who want to pocket our country.
All right, Ajuri Ngilale, it's been interesting talking to you. Thanks for coming.
A true honor to be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay with us. We still have our other topic, political parties and the race for 2023 coming up shortly. Stay with us. We'll be back after this break.
Youths are about the greatest assets the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth Entrepreneurship Support Years by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youths, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria. Pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. And now, just to begin our discussion on unfolding issues in the political parties, let's take this report from Timothy Yusuf.
One of the common features of the Nigerian democracy in the Fourth Republic, that is 1999 till date, is intra- and inter-party conflicts. Interestingly, conflict being inevitable in organized societies, according to many, is a necessary condition for politics. Politics therefore create and reconcile conflicts whereby every person, group and sections of the political system is guided by interests. These interests, according to analysts, are rooted in political power consolidation, use, exercise and application towards who gets what, when and how, by individuals and groups within political parties who share varied interests outside what the parties hold supreme. The next round of election is the November 6th governorship election in Anambra State. It will be a four-horse race, but will the internal wranglings in the three major parties, as witnessed in the last few weeks, augur well for the system and the entire nation's democratic climate?
Nigerians are awaiting the final resolution of the issues.
In line with INEC guidelines and timetable, political parties in June conducted primary elections to pick their candidates for the November 6th governorship election in Anambra State. All the major parties in the state, namely the ruling All Progressives Grand Alliance (APGA), People's Democratic Party (PDP), All Progressives Congress (APC), and the Young Progressives Party (YPP), held their primaries among other political parties. While the YPP picked its candidate, Senator Ifeanyi Ubah, unopposed and peacefully, it was not so for the other three political parties. But intra-party crisis appeared to be the lot of the other three big parties at their primaries. In some cases, parallel primaries were held, while in others, factions emerged to oppose the choices made.
As the chairman of the Anambra State APC 2021 governorship primaries, I hereby declare Dr. Andy Ubah the valid winner of this 2021 Anambra State APC governorship primaries.
And I expect us to be better than those against whom we contend. For me, this is a matter of conscience and principle, and as such, there can be no compromise. Therefore, I'll do everything within my abilities and the law to ensure that the travesty orchestrated by President Abiodun and his team will not stand.
I have the honor of presenting to Professor Soludo Chukwuma the certificate of return.
ABGA did not duly notify the Commission of the date of the Congress where the ad hoc delegates were elected as required by Section 85 of the Electoral Act 2010 as amended.
Now the question is, why did INEC wait? Why was INEC waiting?
Hereby declare Mr. Ezebebo Valentine Chinato as the winner of the PDP Anambra gubernatorial primary election.
All issues have been resolved, and the party is now in a good state and strengthened.
ABGA and the PDP, which are more popular in the state, are facing deep and unabated factional crises. In addition, some members of the National Working Committee of the PDP are calling for the sack of the party's national chairman, Prince Uche Secondus. APC's challenge is tilted more towards the legality of the Governor Buni-led caretaker and extraordinary convention committee.
There's nowhere in the judgment of the majority where the efficacy of the office of our chairman, national chairman, was questioned. Nowhere. What happened was that the judgment of the tribunal that says that the holding of a party position does not contravene Section 183 of the Constitution still stands.
We thank members of the party for holding out, for your prayers, for your support, and well-meaning Nigerians who have been waiting patiently for the resolution of these issues. You can see the chairman of the BOT is here, you can see all the governors are here, and you can see the national chairman of our party is here. To God be the glory.
Experts say there are indications that the outcomes of the primaries and the emerging crisis in ABGA, PDP and APC will throw up litigations ahead of the main election in November and afterwards. Already, some aspirants are threatening to go to court if the leaderships of their parties do not heed to their demands for the cancellation of the primaries. What is certain, however, is that the outcomes of the primaries will aggravate the internal discord in the affected parties. In Abuja, Timothy Yusuf.
All right. The report sets the tone for our second discussion. Let me just introduce our guests and we'll get started. We would like to welcome to this program the Honorable Rimande Shaulu Kwewum. He's a member of the House of Representatives, PDP Taraba. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Cyril.
Right. Let me also welcome to this program Fatima Zara Umar, a lawyer. She's a member of the APC, the All Progressives Congress. Thanks for being here.
It's an honor.
All right. And welcome to Daniel Bwala, a legal practitioner. We're glad to have you join us on this discussion. Let me also introduce Ezenwa Nwagu, who's Executive Director, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Thanks for being here tonight.
It's my pleasure.
All right, as we always do, we acquaint you with the procedure of this program. It is on this segment that you can join in the discussion in the studio here. The numbers to call will be on your screens, and we advise you take advantage of those numbers. Right, and do remember, when your call gets through, turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid a hurlback or echo. And once you're through, your name appears on the screen. Just go right ahead with a question or comment. Don't waste too much time on greetings. You don't have time. Do it quickly so others can also get on the platform and contribute to the discussion. Once again, thanks for being with us on NTA Tuesday Live. It's about unfolding issues in party politics. Let's start off and talk to Honorable Rimande Shaulu. Give us your impressions about the activities of the political parties.
Well, in the first place, I think the point must be made from the outset that political parties are pressure groups, the most important pressure groups in democratic systems. And they emerged as pressure groups with agenda, pressure groups with structures, and pressure groups with objectives, mainly of capturing power. Now, the fact that they exist about power means that there will be contestation, there will be struggles about who controls what in the political parties, because you know power is about competitive, authoritative allocation of resources, and if you control the power, you will be able to administer some things and you'll be able to allocate these resources. And so I find it strange also to when people think and would want political parties not to have controversies. All through history, political parties have controversies. Political parties result in struggles, some of them in armed struggles, as history has amply demonstrated. Political parties have split. Political parties have emerged, marched together. So there is really nothing strange about what is happening in Nigeria, in my own view. Okay. The only difference that you may make about what is happening in Nigeria is that more of what is happening in Nigeria is competition of individuals rather than competition for ideas, that you have competing ideas. For instance, the liberal democratic system in the United States or in most European countries, you have parties are contesting, you have parties set up to contest for certain ideas and certain programs within government. And these ideas are so strong that people remain in those political parties for most of their lives. Very rarely will you see people move from one political party to another. Unfortunately, especially since the military took over, when the military tried to forge what you might call, tried to forge a national identity, said you cannot have religious party, you cannot have ethnic parties. We now have parties that have emerged and claiming to be national parties. Some of them are actually ethnic in nature or religious in nature, but pretending to be nationalistic in nature. So we will have individuals easily move from one political party to another.
All right.
And so it's no longer about contestation of ideas, of how society can be improved, but essentially about how can I be in power, how can I be the one that will be in charge of allocating resources in the society.
All right, we'll return to you, but let's get the views of Fatima Zara Umar of the APC.
Yes.
Yes, same issues, yes.
My own understanding, I think fundamentally the problem we have as Nigerians is we're quick to compare our own democracy to advanced democracies of the world. And I'm always quick to point out that those are not the standards for democracy. We are no way, shape, or form in the same league as the liberal democracies of the West. We are still growing. And some of these issues that come up are part of the growing pains, if you will, of our political system. We're still growing, we're still developing, and we're still reeling from the effects of military rule in our national psyche. So, like my brother rightly pointed out, there is nothing new because it is a collection of people with ambition. It is a collection of people with the sole aim of capturing power. Some of us are progressive, some of us are not progressive. So I don't really think that we do ourselves a service when we look at what is happening in our country and our first resort is to apply Western ideas to our own local problems.
Okay. Well, Daniel Boala, let's come to you. Would it be safe for us to describe politics, especially at the party level, as essentially conflictual and controversial?
Well, in one breath, one may agree with the fact that controversies will always be around politics because politics is an association of like minds, but most of the times, minds that also have their own individual visions and goals. And that is why in a political party where you have Congress or you have primaries, you have contestants coming together to give what they believe as their vision for the party, hoping that if they win the ticket of the party, they can then project to the nation what their vision is for the country. So basically, political party is defined by its own ideology. For example, APC, ever since we had the merger and then came into governance, right from the beginning when we had the change agenda, which is reflected in our manifesto, we are driven by progressive ideology, an ideology that is built around creating, bridging the inequality in the society, creating opportunities for people, and then reaching out to the downtrodden. That is reflected in the social investment program of the government. But also creating this avenue for youth inclusiveness and women inclusiveness in governance. And you can see that in every strata of the politics of APC and in various areas of governance that APC is administering. You see that reflected. Another thing again is that a political party hopes to help in redirecting the vision of the nation for the purposes of taking the nation to prosperity, because virtually every country of the world, when they talk about politics and governance, you will hear that the dream of the government or the dream of the party is to take the country to a place of prosperity. One of the ideologies of APC, which is also reflected in a manifesto, and when the president began the campaign to win election, he clearly made out, is also the idea of fighting corruption, because we believe that we are where we are as a country because of successive corruption that has sort of eaten deep into the fabrics of the society. And so we believe as a political party that when you gain power, you will begin to build the various institutions of government that will provide transparency, that will open up good governance, and then be able to fight graft in every strata of the economy. So political parties try to take power, but more than just seizing power, political parties believe that they have a vision for the country, and that if they are elected into governance, they will direct the country in the path of prosperity. There is no doubting the fact that no party is perfect anywhere in the world. If you go to America, you still find the problem. And like my sister said, there is no point comparing countries with another countries because we have distinctive characteristics. For example, in America, you have the society that's largely directed in a certain way. We have multiple tribes, different cultures, different background. We have, different sphere of life and the economy. So each political party begins to advocate and then push the vision of that party for the purpose of bringing good governance. And since when we took power in 2015 to this moment, although we cannot say we have gotten everything or we have reached the end of where we want to go, but there is a vast difference between what we saw and what we have done. We believe in our politics of infrastructure. You can see that reflected in roads, in the airport, and in all that.
We'll have time to talk about all that, but let's hear from Ezenwawawu.
Yeah, what do you want me to talk about?
Well, what we've been talking about since we started, the same questions we put into you. Yes, political parties, they want to take over, they want to entrench their own ideologies, and like Daniel Bwala said, in the case of the APC, they want to address the numerous challenges of society. But the question is, yes, they want to do all these things. So are we to assume that there is no unanimity in the approach to that, leading to conflicts and controversies?
I think it's important to first come from the point of history, and then learning, and then unlearning. And where that leads us to is to say that since the beginning of this democracy, you need to first look at the ideological view from which the ruling classes have looked at governance. So you are going to see that it's been more from the lenses of the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, in terms of the economic direction in which they are going as a ruling class. So whether it's the PDP or the APC, there is no differentness in terms of the ideological
posturing for which they are leading the country. Is either they are talking about tariffs, subsidies, and all the other things for which we've known governance in the last 40 years in the country, whether it's military or especially from the Babangida regime where we had this structural adjustment program. So it's important to first situate correctly that in terms of economic viewpoint, there is no differentness in the way the ruling class in Nigeria has approached governance. Having said that, in terms of character and nature of power and politics, I also have not seen any learning in terms of where we have been in the past. All the issues that characterize the political parties of the past are still reflecting. So whether we are making comparisons with liberal democracies in Europe or North America, the challenge is that we are still dealing with the issues of primordial, antediluvial, very ethnic, religious issues that dominate our understanding of political organizing. So, and then we have also the challenge of ownership of the political parties. The way I have conceived our political parties is that the people don't own those parties. There are still very entrenched interests that dominate the political parties, especially the dominant ones. Even the new ones that came up are still very individual in their nature, character, and complexioning. So if we don't make comparisons, we at least should learn from history and say what are the things that we need to improve. We are not seeing much in terms of that definite intentional improvement in terms of political party organizing. And what do I mean by that? People cannot make a career in political party administration in the country, because at the end of the day, whether it's a cleaner up to the leaders of those political parties, they represent different tendencies within the ruling class, and those tendencies are in a competitive engagement within these structures to own the party. And at the end of the day, they elbow out the people and then make them visitors, in the sense that whether it's the party convention, primaries, or whatever, at the end of the day, you find out that there are people who bring people to the parties. There are no issues of, what do you call it, dues. There are no issues of even clear nominal rules, except attempts in the recent few weeks back in both political parties to see whether they can have clear, identifiable nominal rules. That has not been available. So you can't. So it's so funny that somebody can be one in the morning and then become another in the evening. And it's so worrying, because if you look at the past, like I said, it also was part of the challenge. You could see the likes of Zeke, moving out to eventually going back to the east, taking out Etayo and the rest of them, and then Etayo leaving to form his own political parties. We came up to Abubakar leaving PRP and the rest of them, and then recently there are people who are serial defectors. You can't even say where they are. If the ambition is not tolerated this morning, in the evening they have joined another one, and so shamelessly they come back to the same party. So you do not have ideological differentness. You do not have that thing for which I can say somebody is an APC member, the other one is a PDP member, or the other one is this other party. Until we see that differentness in terms of ideological outlook, in terms of what you think about the economy, in terms of what you think about education, in terms of what you even think about corruption. Because my colleagues have talked about, the idea of celebrating, mantranization of these concepts, as if you don't know that the Constitution says that it is the responsibility of government to abolish corruption, whether it is PDP or APC. You have that responsibility. So when you take it out as a mantra,
we will now go to the specifics. Thank you. We will now go to the specifics and ask and say, yes, you might easily say there should be, or there would be, or there's bound to be controversies within the political party setup. But what Nigerians are looking at, what they are seeing unfolding now, are conflicts that rock the very foundation of political parties, internal wranglings that defy even the mechanisms put in place to ensure a united and cohesive force. And people ask and say, no, if this is happening within the parties, how can we trust that the parties will be able to manage crises on a larger scale like in the Nigerian state?
No, I think you are not right there, Cyril. The fact of the matter is that the current crisis that we have in the political parties are about their institution, their structures, and the procedures for doing things. I can speak on behalf of, I can speak on the PDP situation in the PDP. Okay. What we have in the PDP that Governor Tambuwal said had been resolved is simply a demand by some members of the party, which is within their right, to say that, okay, you chairman, you have done enough. Is it possible you leave the party, resign? Because we had examples in the past of party leaders resigning for the party to survive, for the party to have a new face. So, because nobody demanded, nobody said the chairman of the party was going to be sacked. It was not part of what he said. Please, can you resign? And he said, normal thing in political parties to demand that people should resign. It's not anything fundamental. Now, it has been resolved, as far as I know. And I want to also say this, that as far as I'm concerned, when political parties, when we come to say that political parties in Nigeria are substandard or cannot have the experience, cannot have examples of what has happened elsewhere, we block ourselves out of important lessons of how societies are managed, of how political parties have emerged. Now, just specifically, everywhere there were demands, for instance, that the Labour Party chairman in the UK should resign. It did happen. Several times these things have happened. There are normal demands that members, and they are enshrined in the party constitutions, as far as the PDP is, that if members don't want something, they can take certain course of action. And if they resolve, so be it, is resolved. I don't think that we should, the moment you take conflicts, except you are defining conflicts as violence, if you are defining conflict as differences of opinion, as heated debates.
Okay. But
heated debates.
Right.
I don't think.
But heated debates and difference in opinion has always led to violence in the Nigerian context.
Not always. It's not always that it leads to. And if you want to talk about violence in Nigeria as it relates to political parties, as it relates to things that happen, most of the time when those things happen, if you go to our history from the First Republic, it does happen, or it did happen in the past, when procedures were breached, when what people termed to be their rights were breached, and when within the party structure or the legal system, there was no way, as for in the perception of those people, that they were going to get redress. So you have that problem. But as it is today, we have evolved. The evolution that we have had has made us going back on some of the things that we did in the past, bringing back some of the things that we said were not good, and then discarding. If you look at the way we have developed in Nigeria, for instance, in the past, we made rules. In the First Republic, political parties existed. There were ethnic political parties. And the ethnic political parties, we came to a time that we felt, the leaders felt that, okay, if you had parties that were organized along political parties, they were going to increase our fault lines. And so decisions were made by the military government. Now, you cannot form a political party if it does not have if it does not have offices in certain number of states and so forth. We also brought into our constitution the federal character, that not just the political parties, but political offices should be inclusive of all groups and so forth. So these are evolutionary process that we're headed, that we're going. And I find it very surprising that people would think that we don't need examples of other climes. Even the word democracy is not found in our dictionary, in our local languages. The TV that we're using, the wristwatches that we're using, the phones that we're using, everything that we're using today, we are copying good examples from other parts of the world. And what are the good examples that we're copying? The good examples that we're copying, if you look at the history, if you look at the world the way it is today, the places that have the greatest peace and security, the places that have the greatest form of economic development are countries, are spaces where certain things happen. What are the things that happen in those places? You have inclusion of women. Yeah. You have freedom of religion. You have inclusion of every group in the society. And the result of it is that people have hope in the political system that it can accommodate them, that today if they don't have, tomorrow they can have. So people queue up. But if you now create a system where you exclude some people ab initio, you are going to have problems. And I think one thing that we must not forget is the fact that Nigerians are as good human beings as people in the United States or people in other parts of the world. I've been to international fora where people talk about African standards. I feel insulted. I've told people that it is racist to think that the standards that apply in the United States or in the United Kingdom cannot be applied here, as if we are substandard human beings. We don't respect rules. We cannot follow what other people follow. If you look at Nigerians, everywhere that Nigerians have gone, they have performed very well. Okay. Any part of the world. Meaning that if we create a system, if you look at just the last thing, if you look at what happened when we had this World Cup that France won, some people said it was an African team that won because most of the players were Africans. The president of France said no, it's a French team because it's the circumstances and the conditions that were created in France that made them win. And that is the problem that we have. We should create circumstances, we should create conditions that people will thrive in this country, that the talents that people have will thrive. And I think that if we do that, we are going to have a situation where this country will be where it's going to be. We cannot constrict people and still think that this country can be where it ought to be.
All right, thank you very much. We have a couple of reports, and this also underlining the issues at stake. Let's take the first one. That's from Lagos.
It's no doubt that political parties all over the world have issues plaguing their parties, but there are systems in place to resolve them before they escalate. In Nigeria, the situation is different. The court decides parties' crisis instead of the internal party's mechanism to resolve all contending issues affecting the party. In the past 2 months, there have been several reports of crisis rocking political parties in the country. Ahead of 2023, Nigeria's dominant political party battles survivor leadership crisis. The ruling party, the All Progressives Congress, APC, faces legal ditch over Supreme Court ruling in Ondo governorship election petition as legality of Buni's leadership called to question. In the same vein, the main opposition party, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, is neck-deep in crisis of confidence plagued by defection and resignation. Also, the drama that has been playing in the All-Progressive Grand Alliance, ABGA, over the forthcoming Anambra governorship election calls for concern.
Lagos State being one of them, the last election that was conducted and all whatnot, even though they emerged, victorious in the local government election and all what, there are still some aggrieved individuals that were not satisfied with the way the primaries were conducted or how some people emerged unopposed. these are the ripples all over the place.
All these emerging developments in the various political parties place huge burden on the electorate on their voting behavior.
There is a suggestion that the political parties are not stable. There's also the suggestion that they will go for the jugular against 2023. And so it leads to some apathy. People are there, they are pulling back. Let's see what they are doing. Let's watch them, because it's their game. There is no difference between party A and party B anyway.
A public that is more concerned with the issues of bread and butter, the issues of, subsistence, would hardly, want to delve into, challenges of the political elite. They know that at the end of the day, whoever would emerge would most likely be a consensus.
However, political analysts have suggested that political parties must begin to develop robust party manifestos that is people-driven.
As it is in one party, so it is in another party. But let's go over to Anambra and see if the scenario is any different.
Analyses have shown that party crises have remained a common feature of political parties in Anambra State and the country at large. But unlike previous situations where inter-party crises were the order of the day, the current democratic process has witnessed a predominantly intra-party conflicts today. Internal party crises arising from the just concluded party primaries, a process of selecting the party's candidate for the November 6 governorship election, has led to a near collapse of some party structures.
What we just saw in this particular election is a situation where politicians appear to have lost completely the spirit of sportsmanship, such that some people, join the race with a kind of do-or-die attitude, prevalent in the three major political parties in Anambra State, the APC, APGA, and PDP.
Electors are asking who is the candidate, who is not the candidate, is this person the candidate, when is this person's name going to be released, when is that person, So there's a wide range of confusion amongst the electorates, and definitely it will affect voter turnout.
Virtually all the major players, political parties, are having issues, and that does not portend well for our democracy and the election that is coming, because definitely it will dampen the spirit and the morale of people. The enthusiasm is being lost.
This in turn has hindered emergence of credible candidates, giving rise to internal party squabbles and litigations.
So what should be done is for INEC to elevate their game, ensure that all the political parties keep proper records with INEC.
This situation, investigations show, has in turn created fear and tension in the minds of the electorate and may lead to voter apathy. As Anambra State gears up for the November 6 governorship election, many say there is need for a sustainable approach to managing internal party crises that may mar the process.
All right, at this point we'll take a short break. When we return, the conversation will continue on the issues emerging from the political parties. Stay with us.
Youths are about the greatest assets the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth entrepreneurship support, yes, by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youths, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria. Pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. Now, if we've seen the story of the PDP, well, the APC too has its hands full with numerous squabbles and, conflicts raging in them. Right.
Well, for us in the APC, we are progressives, as it is in our name. We are people who are committed to the ideals of progressive Nigeria. So we don't really see those things as squabbles. For us, we have no problem. We have started our congresses. We are on the way to have a national convention. And also we have, within the party, had mechanisms to resolve some of these issues. The thing is that when you have different people that have different ideas on how to move the country forward, there are certain clashes that will occur. Unlike some other people, ours are not out of control. Like I said, for us, we don't really have a problem in the APC. Our problem seems to be more in the media than actually in the party. The media keeps emphasizing on a conflict that doesn't exist.
Well, it's not the media. It's
well, Cyril,
what they report on.
Well,
and say,
Cyril,
for instance,
there is no single
in the
human.
last,
There's no single human endeavor that is free of conflict or squabble. Even in your family, the children you birth, you have conflicts with them. You have squabbles from time to time. As a family, as a progressive family, these things are normal. Like I said, for us in the APC, a lot of this drama actually is in the media. For us back home, within the party, we have people with different ideas. We have people with different views on how to do certain things. And we are on course to getting our party on track. We are preparing for the elections, and we will do well as usual. Now, to reply my brother, who seems to have misunderstood my point about having homegrown attitudes and analysis towards our democracy. It's good for us to have international standards. That's right. But my point was that in analyzing our situation, we should also look at the complexities and the nuances of Nigeria as a country. So for instance, if I'm going to compare the Nigerian democracy to the UK democracy, the UK democracy has no history of military rule, for instance. You mentioned some of the things that have happened in our history. The UK does not share the same history with Nigeria. So the point is that in any analysis of our political culture, we need to look at the context and the nuances that are unique to us as a country. You mentioned also that, we didn't have national parties before 1999. Well, we are evolving, and we are evolving into a political culture that hopefully might catch up to the international ideals that we always like to look up to. But I think for now it is very important for the players in politics, for the electorate, for citizens, for everyone to always remind themselves of the context in which this country and the political parties in this country operate.
Okay, let's go over to Daniel Buala. And I'd like to put this to you. It's not strictly a media drama that ensued in what happened with the past two national leadership of the APC. Was it a media drama? It wasn't strictly, was it?
It may not have started with the media, but I agree with Fatima. The media sat on it, the media fed on it, and the media sustained the conversation for a long period of time. Even with the present problem that we have, with supposed problem that we have in the party. If I tell you, you won't believe, there is a media house in which even a suit filed by PDP was discussed layer by layer. And we know in our discipline that once a matter is in court, you refrain from discussing the substance of the case. But it was handled. In the last 1 week, I have seen across four media houses, I'm talking about electronic media houses, where the same issue about APC was discussed, re-discussed, re-emphasized, re-energized, and it's all in the media. But when you come into the party, you will see that all the members of the party are compact. As a matter of fact, to support our point further, PDP around this period in their time. This is like the second term of the president, and we're getting to the second year of the second term. We have 2 more years before we say the second term is ended. Around the same period in PDP, they've lost House of Assembly members, National Assembly members, governors into political party. But comparatively, you bring it down back to APC, rather than losing members, we have gained 2 governors, and in the coming days, we are going to have 2 more governors. In fact, a member of the Board of Trustees of PDP joined APC. Now, this is the greatest evidence we have against the case that there is a crisis in APC. Are there differences? Yes. In fact, let me even further say that in PDP's case, the current crisis that is rocking PDP, and by the way, PDP is 22 years today. 22-year-old boy has attained the age of majority, can be grafted to the army. He can just do anything, but PDP behaves like a toddler. APC is barely 7 or 8 years, which is still a minor in the real sense of the word. Yet we have a disciplined party in a direction. I am not suggesting we are perfect. I'm not suggesting there are disagreement. There are no disagreement. I'm not suggesting there are no differences and people sharing different opinions. But the way in which we are dealing with crisis, with quote-unquote crisis in our party, is in a more disciplined way. When the first national chairman was removed by NEC, one would have thought there would be litany of cases in court. Not a single person went to court to challenge the removal of the national chairman. In fact, the national chairman himself, rather than going to court, he graciously accepted. He said, if this is a decision of the NEC, and he accepted. And we moved on from there. Now, here we are, the caretaker, only a caretaker committee, not even a substantive executive, only a caretaker committee within the span of a year or so. This Governor May Malabuni, look at the success he has achieved in terms of making the party so attractive that more people are coming into the party. I need to ask whoever is saying that there is a crisis in APC the stallion question, because my understanding of crisis is that anytime there is a crisis, people look to the door, to the exit door. I have not seen where there is a crisis and people are looking to come into the party. And we have a directional leader. The president has never coerced any member of the party, any executive of the party. If you look at the build-up to our election in 2019, all kinds of pull and push and pressure in the party. One would have thought that, okay, the president will intervene in this way, he will override somebody. At all times, the president will say, what is the decision of the party? I will abide by that. But remember, PDP have had a sitting president, gone to the house of their chairman and at gunpoint asked him to sign a resignation. And then to counter the point by my friend here, when he said there are no differences between the 2 political parties, the few things I have said is a clear
lines. We have a call coming through now. We'll return to you in a moment, but let's see if we can get this call through. It's from Junaidu in Zamfara. Hello, Junaidu. Are you still there? We'll try and get back to the phones later on. But yes, just for you to conclude the bit you were talking about, and then we'll go to Ezenwa. Yes.
Yeah, who said that there is actually no difference between the 2 political parties. I agree with him to the extent that he said people move from one party to the other anyhow. Now, understandably so, because one, our democracy is nascent. The political party process is a small one compared to America that is over 200 or 300 years, UK that is over 600 or 700 years. And then we have more than 250 native languages in the country. We have different set of circumstances. But there is a marked difference between APC and PDP, and I maintain. Right. For example, with respect to corruption, he said it is there in the Constitution. It is not a miracle that a political party is saying we are fighting corruption. But it is still there in the Constitution when PDP said that stealing was not a corruption. Okay. And yet in our own, we gave will to the fight against corruption. Look at the recoveries and the role that the recovered monies have played in the budget of the country.
Okay.
And another example,
pause again and
PDP,
we'll return to you.
when you ask them, they say, well, dividends of democracy is their point.
Let's go over to Ezenwa and say, well, Ezenwa, the conflicts, even though the politicians here would rather not call them conflicts, have gone right down to the grassroots, where you find cases instituted even at local level. You know, there's hardly any leadership of the parties that are not going through one challenge or the other in terms of who should be where. And you also alluded to the crisscrossing of politicians across parties.
And say the four dominant political parties have crisis. And my friend Daniel is saying that there is differentness. But let's say, for instance, that I didn't see any party that published, for instance, the members of the party who will participate in the congresses that took place in any of the political parties. And that becomes the reason why you can have the kind of shifts that you are seeing. Whether it's the PDP, APC, and the litigations over 20 cases in different courts, just resulting from primaries of political parties. So I have a problem in terms of how political parties are organized in the country. And it has to do with wanting different outcomes from different other institutions, but which they themselves, as the legitimate recruitment institution for leaders in the country, don't follow those patterns. And what do I mean? For instance, if INEC wants to have elections tomorrow, INEC will send the list of prospective voters to the political parties ahead of time. In fact, right now, some of those with age, what do you call them? Whether they are with the people living with disabilities and all of those things are now factored into the voter register. And so they are placed in a particular place where people can go and see them. The political parties will organize internal elections that are opaque, that are secret, whether they are APC, PDP, ABGA, or even the new political parties. And so it's a generic challenge that we need to deal with. I don't know when any of the political parties surrendered people who committed offenses, took them to court, punished them, sanctioned them, like other institutions are doing. INEC will punish their own staff, take them to court, interdict them for various electoral offenses. The political parties don't do that. There are lessons that we have to learn in terms of organizing. And I'm also worried that sometimes we have a challenge where interventions become a bureaucracy. When you say, for instance, that you have a caretaker, I expect that it should quickly do what it has to do and have a substantive leadership. To continue to have a situation in which there are people, you say, oh, you don't have a crisis, but immediately the Ondo case, the Supreme Court made that ruling on the governorship election in Ondo State. My friend Daniel Buala and the rest of them came out. There were issues. The party members now, drew up something that perhaps were being, handled. These are real issues, and we can't continue to say, oh, there is no crisis. Let us do what we have to do to give the people of Nigeria confidence in our electoral and party systems. That first and foremost, there is a structure and that is a process that people can follow, that people can respect their own internal, processes, which we call internal party democracy, which is the challenge that we have in all the political parties generally.
Okay, Honorable.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm surprised when people talk about corruption, for instance, and I'm surprised because corruption perception of Nigeria is worse now than even under the PDP. That is one. All the reports by World Bank, all the reports by international transparency groups show that Nigeria has gone very bad, far below what we should talk about. And it's also interesting, let me conclude. Right. It's also interesting to know that people are talking about PDP years of corruption. For the sake of argument, let's admit that those were years that the country really went bad. But where are the people that were in charge of PDP at that time? Where are they now? they are in APC. You have former, no. You have PDP minister, for instance, the minister of,
Yes, I'd rather we didn't go into that, but concentrated on the question of in internal democracy in the parties.
I'll come to that, but I need to talk about the allegations about corruption.
Yes, but
just 1 minute. I won't take your time. For instance, PDP established all the anti-corruption agencies. Under Obasanjo, ministers that were corrupt, are alleged to be corrupt, were sacked, were removed from office, went for trial. All the people that have been convicted so far, the trials started during PDP.
Okay, so now
and
back to the
for
question
instance,
of
if you have all the people that made the country very bad, have all moved from PDP, are in APC today, former governors, former ministers. APC today has more PDP former chairmen than PDP has. So if you are talking about corruption, I think corruption is resident in APC because the people who were corrupt are in APC. But let me come to the question
we'll
of internal
take this
democracy.
phone call and then we'll come back to that because we have Umar calling in from Berlin Kebi. Umar, hello Umar, go ahead. Hello, are you there now? Okay, fine. So let's try as much as possible to stay within the limits of party democracy and the activities. Yes, let's hear you now.
No, the fact of the matter is that if we talk about the party democracies and what people, you see, the challenge that I have as a personal challenge is the fact that we are making the National Assembly, we have made too many rules for the political parties. Political parties are supposed to be self-governing institutions. Make their mistakes, they suffer with the public. That is what I think it should be. For instance, again, I may go back to the example that some of my colleagues may not like. The Labour Party in the United Kingdom, for instance, goes out of its way to look for people that they think are qualified to hold positions. Irrespective of the process, they bring those people up and make them to hold positions. Parties go out to look for people. In the past, what we had up to the First Republic, I think up to 1993 or thereabout, people like Ezenwan said, people owned the political parties. People contributed money for parties, for political office holders. I mean, for people who are aspiring to contest election, to go about campaigning. When you go to a certain location, the party people contribute, make sure that things happen. But now, I think since around 1990 or 89 or thereabout, we developed a system where people own political parties, and that ownership of political parties, whether it is ABGA, it is APC, it is PDP, it is ACN, or that, it has resulted in what you call godfathers, who determine what happens in political parties. And the result of that is that it is only the people that the godfathers want that the system ends up throwing up. And then you have the further challenge that because the people thrown up may not actually have the support of the grassroots, are disconnected from the grassroots, you now have a situation where you have to manipulate the election system. You have to manipulate the system to be in power. So we have all kinds, it's a system that we have, a systemic problem that we have that needs to be challenged and interrogated. And I think that, for instance, some people say, if you go to your village, tribal village organization, and they contribute money, and you steal the money, you are not going to live in the village. If people own the political parties, really, and people determine the finances of the political parties, like Ezenwan said, you hardly find people today contributing, paying membership in political parties.
Okay. Two things bother me here as we come to you.
Yes.
And one of them is, why is it extremely difficult to have a smooth transition from one leader to another in all the parties? Same fate will go, same thing has happened to virtually all the parties. Every time it comes to a period of one leader taking over from the other, there is a big problem on hand that leads to so many litigations. Second thing, when it comes to election period, the same thing, the parties cannot come out with any framework devoid of bitter rancor that goes on and on, sometimes months and years after an election.
I mean, to answer your question, I would say a lot of the rancor generally is because of the egos involved in the game. If you are in politics because of your ego, anything that doesn't go your way, you will create chaos to stop it. But I also think that we have evolved from the days of political gangsterism where people were held at gunpoint and sitting governors were kidnapped. I think even though it may seem like we haven't made progress politically, I think we have actually made progress politically, because now there are certain standards of accountability that did not exist before. And in answering that question, I'd also like to clarify the impression that the caretaker committee is somewhat a permanent thing. It is not a permanent thing. It is not also in charge, quote unquote, of the affairs, I beg your pardon, of the APC. The caretaker committee is an example of proper internal democracy, where to avoid rancor and to avoid the bitterness that you speak of, the leaders of the party sat down and decided that a collection of people within the party should move the party from that rancor to somewhere peaceful and calm.
But that has also generated
but we are on the road.
more controversies.
But we are on the road. Okay. And if there are a couple of potholes on the road, we will still get to the destination. Okay. So, for example, the mischief in the media that Governor Mai Mala Buni is the chairman of the APC. I would like to correct this impression. Governor Mai Mala Buni is the chairman of the caretaker committee and the extraordinary convention planning committee. He is not the chairman of the party. He is the head of a committee with terms of reference. And the most important assignment that committee has is to make sure that a convention holds so that we can have proper and substantive executives in office. Now, we are already on the road. Like I said, it is not a perfect process. It is also a road that, it is a Nigerian road. So definitely, Cyril, there will be potholes. Okay. There will be craters, there will be gravel on the road. But we are getting there. We are not holding anybody at gunpoint.
Okay.
We are not harassing anybody. We are not kidnapping anybody. We are following the process. And there is no outcome of this that is bad for our democracy or for our legal system. Let me just put that out there.
Okay. Well, let's go over to Daniel Bwala, and I'll still harp on this point and say to you, well, it does seem that the media becomes the whipping boy, but it is not the media that goes out. It is the party people who go out to the media and either grandstand, or it is the party people who institute cases that are of interest to the people.
With respect to the crisis in political party, if you look at the courts have not helped matters, because there is an age-long principle of law that internal wranglings of political party, the courts are prohibited from inquiring into it. And we have transited, when the democracy started in 1999, then you see the National Assembly will amend the Electoral Act and say the court can inquire once the party fails to abide by its own constitution. And then you move to a point where it says once the party makes a decision, and in their own constitution they say these are the mechanisms for dispute resolution. For example, in APC, once there is a dispute, we recognize the fact that there might be dispute, but the mechanism for resolving that is there. You must exhaust all the internal mechanism for dispute resolution before you go to court. And Article 17 is very clear. Once you fail to adhere to the internal mechanism without exhausting it, you rush to the court, our constitution says you stand expelled from the party. Now, assuming, because I have had the privilege of serving as a secretary of both the governorship screening committee and senatorial appeals committee in the senatorial primary election. I have a sizable knowledge of the workings of issues in our party. And I will push the envelope further to say, thankfully, APC is not owned by anybody. Because you raised the issue in the course of our conversation, issue arose as to political parties are individualized. People own them. There is not even the most influential member of the party that people say is Asiwaju Tinubu. They will tell you he does not own the party. The party is owned by the people, and whoever is manning that position of authority controls it. There are two crises, if you want me to admit the word crisis, between the two major political parties. In APC, it borders around issues, interpretation of the judgment of the Supreme Court in the case of Akeredolu, whether the interpretation of that judgment affects the caretaker committee. Purely issue and then matter of law. Conversely, in PDP, the crisis is that somebody wrote a petition to EFCC and said that the national chairman and the committee ate their money. There is always a difference. Now, we have not reached a point of perfection. We are moving towards it, but at every given time you call me, I will try to give you the distinction. It is impossible for me to discuss here as a neutral. Everyone can talk as a neutral because he does not belong to any political party. But I think that the essence of our conversation today is whatever we discuss, we must talk comparatively. And there is no similarities between APC and PDP. Raise the question of people move from...
The people would say to you that if a party they intend to give their votes to run their affairs is enmeshed in unending crises, court cases, counter cases, then why should the people say, look, why should the people give their mandate to the parties?
Point number one is that you cannot stop an aggrieved person from going to court because that is his constitutional right, whether within a political party or outside a political party. If you stop that person from approaching the court to air his grievances, you are introducing anarchy, because what it means is that people will find another means. People do that in other countries of the world in terms of dispute resolution. But I agree with you that sometimes the activities of political parties create a situation where people do not find democratization. There is no internal democracy of political party, and it's a work in progress. You remember in the build-up to the 2019 election, APC experimented, to a large extent, direct primaries across all the states of the country. In fact, we were battling between the pressure of having to move to indirect, because indirect primaries is what gives rise to this corruption and all these vices. But APC experimented it, and we're moving towards a point where we will entrench this idea of direct primaries, so that if you think you're popular, go and test your popularity. So it's a work in progress, but at every stage of our movement, we are happy to announce what we believe are the successes we have achieved, and then we are happy to admit the areas we need to work on.
Let's go over to Ezewa.
I think my friend Boala knows much more than he's willing to give out here. And what I understand is that he was not introduced as an APC person, so I'm shocked. you were traditional. So, but let me just say this. Let's take subnational elections, for example. Across the country, across different political parties, all these local government elections that have been conducted by whether PDP or APC in the states have been winner take all. So it shows you that when I talk about differentness, what makes a political party attractive is its ability to be different. But when Osun did, it took everything. When Oyo his neighbor did, it took everything. When Zamfara did, it took everything. And then and then we need to deepen democracy. We need to be able to say, for instance, that at that local level, I keep telling people that even most of the governors today who are now Democrats, who have not themselves, except for when it became a matter of musts, many of them have had to run first tenors without conducting local government election. And when even the president came out to say, look, we give money to these local governments, your governors, he didn't say PDP, APC, which means that collectively speaking, there is no rule in terms of how political parties should conduct themselves. And I think that is the political parties that should be able to create that differentness. And it has something to do, unfortunately, with the fact that you cannot differentiate between government in Nigeria and the political parties in terms of party administration. And that's why I keep saying that there is nobody can say you are making a career in party administration, because a governor wakes up, he becomes the caretaker, then at the end of the day, a former governor is elected, what do you call it, chairman, and then at the end of the day, you find out that these structures have rotated around the same kind of people over a period of time across the different political parties. We must come to that point where we separate party administration from government and not allow this language, this leader thing, because when my sister was talking, he said the leaders of the party, agreed that did you have a neck coming to say, did you have a convention, did you have the board of trustees? Your internal party processes must be such that it's able to kick in when there is a crisis. But what you have is that sometimes the president calls people together, and he didn't start with you people, he didn't start with APC, is an inglorious contribution of former leaders of this country who hijacked party administration and structures to the point where it has become so terrible that as we speak now, people cannot even, they did it to the point where they criminalize aspirations, that people cannot even say, I want to run election, where governors buy up the whole expression of interest and party and hold it and give to whoever they want. And that is where you start to hear, I gave you the ticket. That's why you can't have state assemblies respond to the challenges of their offices, because they actually were not creations of the party. They were creations of the individuals who ambushed the party structures and took it over. And so the members of the political party wait for you at your whether it is indirect or direct primaries. They are waiting for you. You have to transport them to the venue of the place. You have to provide t-shirts. You have to provide food. You have to provide transportation. Whichever way, there is some compelling process where an individual, whether it's direct or indirect, is playing a role that the political party should play. I think we need to deal with it from that spectrum rather than this comparison that I'm seeing. The comparison is only important to the point that you score very fine political points as to which one looks better than the other. But the truth of the matter is that intrinsically, the intrinsic values of democracy cannot be found in any of the political parties. And the test for it is what they do with local governance, what they do with subnational governance. Their budgets are not, whether APC or PDP, you cannot click anywhere and find the budget of any of the states. Whereas we can get that of the National Assembly, we can get that of the federal government, no state, whether APC or PDP, you can click and say this is the budget with which they run. In fact, for you to get those budgets, sometimes you have to get through underhand methods to be able to get their budgets. And these are things that the political parties should take into cognizance. We used to have a situation in which political parties organize, conferences, seminars, workshops on topical Nigerian issues.
Yeah, we did the youth program recently.
The youth program you did, we was not.
Okay. Kaduna State's budget is also, and several other APC
all right,
states.
Let's come to you here. And you raised an important issue. You talked about the people owning the party as against individuals. So how, as we begin to progress, what best way to ensure that the people own the party? In other words, let it be the people who fund the party as against an individual who turns around and hijacks the party or its leadership.
Well, the fact of the matter is that if you look at the history, and I'll go back to what I did say, because from the beginning, the starting point, the fact of the matter is that political parties should represent certain ideas, certain philosophies about the movement of a society, how a society should be organized. And if it is done, if things were done that way, in the past we had semblance of that when we had the NEPU, we had the PRP, for instance, championing certain values in society. It was for that reason that people like Hajia Gambo Sawaba went to jail 16 times, and it was because of that that she was fighting, for instance, under NEPU for women to vote, even though she didn't have the right to vote at that time, and she did not vote at that time. Now we have a major problem on our hands in the country today, speaking philosophically. The problem is that the present political parties, the way we have them, whether they are in PDP or APC or ABGA, which is why it is easy for you today to be a PDP member, tomorrow you are an APC member, and next tomorrow you may come back to PDP or go back to APC, as the case may be. Now, the situation that we have is that if you look at the implication of that, we have people who want to be in office today without having an idea of what they want to do in office. Which is why if you go around the states, if you go around everywhere, including here, we seem to have fallen back very seriously, compared, for instance, to countries that we started with. Countries that we started with, for instance, like Brazil, that were buying their Embraer jets to our fighter jets, or Pakistan that we're buying from. Those are third world countries like us, or developing countries like us. But the leadership in those countries had a focus, they had a purpose for which they put their strength. And that happens when you have a group of people come together and say, this is our party, this is where we want to go. And you remain in that place no matter what happens. But we have a situation today, and it did not just start now, even though the slight situation difference that we had in the Second Republic was that when Abubakar Rimi and Governor Goni left the PRP, for instance, they did not go into the ruling party. That was a major difference. Even Goni did not go into the ruling party. They went into a minority party, and they called themselves the progressive. They had philosophies, they had what they thought the country should be like. Now we have parties, like she did point at, personalities that are contesting for power. And the contest for power is for its sake. Because if you go to any state today, most of the states, what you see in state A is what you see in state B. The governors, for instance, a governor, for instance, will have 1,000 or 500 aides. You have the intolerance they have to social media and to the media generally. It goes around everywhere. It does not stop in one political party. Now, it becomes difficult. I've interacted with people from outside the country. It becomes difficult for democratic or political institutions, global political institutions, to want to relate with Nigerian political parties. Because like one of the told me sometime early this year, they are talking with someone who is supposed to be with the center-right today. Tomorrow they find him in a different direction. And we are talking about things that, so I think that we need to open up the political space.
Right.
How do we open up the political space? You know, of course, we go around, we repeat some things, we come back to it. I think we need to open up the political space to the extent that we need to remove the conditions that are embedded in our constitution about who can contest election and who should not contest election. For instance, we need to remove the insistence of the constitution that you must be a national political party to contest election. That is one. I believe that that is unnecessary. It doesn't happen anywhere. The United States or anywhere in the world, parties the parties that create conditions can develop and become big colossus, dominating everywhere, but there are no rules saying that this is how you must be. Number two, we must open up the space for independent contest of election. That is important because if I can contest election without having to kowtow to any political party, any mischief from any political leader, I won't have to decamp from one place to another. I will work on my connections with my constituents. If my constituents reject me, so be it. It means they have rejected me. But where people are constrained by, you have to create a national party with offices in all states of the federation, even if your interest is in ensuring that a political space in a certain state is what you want to promote. I think this idea of building a grand nation that we have tried to do in the last 60 years, and most of Africa indeed have tried since colonial authority left the last 60, 70 years to create grand national identities, are failing. And they are failing because the center is so big that it provides room for crooks to hide, and their communities cannot hold them hostage. For instance, you can pretend, you can say you have been elected or rig election in your, and you can come and live in Abuja here and never go back to your constituency. You don't have to bother about that. But if you have to represent your constituency and the votes of the people will matter, there are certain ways that will behave differently.
Okay. At some point in this conversation, attention was drawn to the fact that most of the societies where progress has been made, they have been inclusive societies, have given women a voice. Now let's look at the Nigerian political party system. How much of a voice and how much room have these parties given to women to aspire to positions and hold key positions in those parties, other than being a woman leader, or, or things like that?
I absolutely share the same sentiment with my brother here, that we need to open up the political space to include more women and more young people, to make it as diverse as possible. The problem with Nigeria is that it has constantly always edged out women in all national conversations, whether politics or anything else. And it seems to be part of our evolution, part of our political evolution, that now the dominant conversations are saying, we want more women, we want more people living with disabilities, we want more young people to be included. And because we are progressives, it's also a conversation on the front burner for us at the APC. So, for example, we are trying to make it compulsory and constitutional for us to say that we alternate positions instead of just giving women leaders. So if we have a national chairman that's a man, we want at least one zonal deputy,
Why shouldn't you have a woman as a national chairman or national secretary?
That is why I said, for example, if we, it's just alternate. So if we have a woman as national chairman, then a man will be the deputy. If we have a woman as national organizing secretary, we are trying to open up the space for women to aspire to just wearing Ankara and going to airports to welcome dignitaries. And for a lot of us who are in politics, it is very painful, because women have a lot more to contribute than just dance steps and fashion styles. We have so much more to contribute. And like we have said earlier in the program, you cannot really make progress as a society by excluding people. Women are part of society. We understand that there might be cultural barriers sometimes. We understand that the game is rigged against women. So, for example, financially, I may not be able to match my male counterpart if I'm running for office, because he will have more money and he will have more people giving him money to run for office. I may not have that. So we're trying to see, but it's not something that can happen, just today. It's a gradual process. And like I said earlier, our politics is evolving. Democracy came back 20-something years ago. So who knows, 20 years from now, the discussion may not even be about creating space for women.
Okay. All right, let's go over to Daniel Bola. And then, well, surely this is one aspect where you would agree yourself that it cuts across party lines. Indeed, no party so far as I know, has, given women and the youth the rightful place to belong to, have they?
So the conversation has been for some time among political parties to create the space for women, create the space for younger people. But most of these issues are now constitutional, and I'm happy to announce to us today and to my panel members who have raised, for example, the issue of opening of the space so that individuals who are running for, say, posts within the state do not have to be encumbered by the requirement of law that the party has to be a national party. I am also a member of the Constitution. I'm a consultant, one of the consultants in this Constitution review, and I'm happy to announce that that issue has been raised in an amendment, and hopefully by the time it passed and the President assent to it, you are going to have a political party that does not have to meet those requirements of having a national presence if the individuals are running for lower posts, say for example within the state. Also, there are several amendment bills for inclusivity and inclusiveness of women and youth. I am aware that there is a conversation around 35% of all appointing positions to be given to the women, both at the federal and at the state level. So if it is passed, you will find that in every cabinet position of the government, 35% must be women. In every commissioner position, 35% must be women. In every appointment into ambassadorial DGs and MDs of departments of government, you are going to find 35% of women. This is a constitutional issue. And we believe that once you're able to amend the constitution and make that a constitutional issue, it binds everybody. So whether this president or that governor or that president or that governor is not interested in bringing that to bear, or a political party is not interested in bringing that to bear, as soon as you come into the mainstream of governance, you are now bound by the constitutional provision. Your government cannot be properly composed if it does not consist of at least 35% of women and probably 10 or 15% youth not above the age of 40. So these constitutional issues that we're introducing, I believe that by the time the exercise is ended, Nigerians will be very, very happy that some of these germane issues have been incorporated into the constitution.
All right. Ezenwa, what's your take on this?
I don't think that this is a gift. I think it's a product of a hard-won struggle over a period of time, and I think we should be in a hurry. We should not be talking about evolution. We have come a long way. Women have young people. We've seen younger people who have double PhDs. We have younger people who have businesses that are running. There is nothing biological. There is nothing physiological. There is nothing that differentiates a 29-year-old person from a 30-year-old person. So this whole constriction of the space is part of that deliberate gerontocratic thing that we have always seen, that the older you are, the wiser. But that's no longer that's not the truth. What a society makes progress with the exuberance of young people and the maturity of the age. That's what can push a society forward. And for women, I think that it is not just going to stop at this affirmative 35% affirmative action. Political parties must take a definite position on elective positions, because at the end of the day, if you have a parliament in which you do not have spaces for young people, women, people living with disabilities as a matter of affirmative action, then you are not going to, if you leave it to contests, you are just going to be going back and forth. Many of the countries that have made this progress have created affirmative action for elective and appointive positions. We can't continue to struggle over something that in a democracy where we should be expanding the space, constantly working to expand the space. Rather, those who get in try to constrict it. But the political parties must show by force of personal example, and that's because in that place it's not difficult. It shouldn't be difficult. If from what my sister said, if you and voila, if you have assistants. In fact, that's even funny. Why should it be assistance? We should have certain positions, national organizing secretary, and some of those positions that are national working committee positions should be left for women. Because at the end of the day, when you have assistant this, deputy this, and at the end of the day, it's only the national woman leader that is a member of the national working committee, which is the highest policy making organ of the political party. Then you leave the fate of the women, even in terms of determining who becomes what in that political party, in the hands of men and people who want to continually restrict the space. So I think that what other thing needs to happen is that beyond women, we should have more and more men understanding that for democracy to thrive, you need to continually work to expand the space. You have a lot of people who come out, educated people who come and say, hey, only people, educated people should be voted in. Democracy is about people who are also not educated. They should also, we can't be talking about reducing space, and at the same time we are saying we want to take edge out other people, whether they are educated or not. Let us continue to work to expand this space. Even in terms of the age, you still find out that the National Assembly in reducing the age for contesting for political offices did not reduce. Senate, for instance, they did not reduce the age. They reduced every other one except that one that concerns them. So we need to push. The world is going out.
All right, yes, okay, fine. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to pause a while there because we're running out of time, really. And just one last point as before we go, and let's start with you, Honorable Ribande Shaulu, and that is, with what is going on in the political space, can we say there is hope to begin to see parties evolving a system where there will be a transition of leadership without rancor across board?
Well, personally, I'm hoping that a number of things will happen. Okay. One of which is that we'll be able to have a transition, and that is one reason why Ghana is ahead of us at most things that the international community is doing with Ghana, is the fact that you are able to have, after having transition from military to civilian, you have first transition from one party to another. Okay. You also need to have similar things happen for the international system to trust that there is stability in the system. Okay. I think that will happen eventually if the political system, if the electoral system functions properly.
All right. Final words?
Yes. As for us, we are, hopeful. We are firm believers in Nigeria. We are firm believers in a proper political culture. So yes, definitely, I hope to see it happen sooner than later. I hope to see it happen sooner than later.
Okay, Daniel Bwala.
Will never happen as long as we're on this planet, even if the political party is in one family. But we can work towards reducing the rancor.
Okay, all right. So, Ezewa, you got the last word.
Politics is a competitive engagement. What needs to happen is like sports. Those who make the rules must ensure that they enforce it.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'd like to appreciate our guests tonight on this program. We thank you for coming, but we must leave this conversation here and say thank you to all those who were part of it. I know the phone lines didn't work tonight. You tried to call in, but it's good to know that you've been with us and you tried to get through. That's as far as we can go. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover saying, continue to stay safe.